Welcome to Chapter 20. This map is the first of two maps that have infinite faceless reinforcements. Scattered across the map are dragon veins and pools of acid. Using these dragon veins will permanently stop the faceless that spawn in that area from spawning. Otherwise, they're going to infinitely spawn until the boss is defeated. That's cool and all, but all the faceless are very underleveled. So much so that every single one of my units gets next to no experience for killing them. So all this chapter does for me is waste my time. The game tries to make the faceless more threatening by giving the enemy skills, which is kind of rare for Birthright enemies. We're facing things like Gamble, HP plus 5, Strong Riposte, Past, Counter and Counter Magic, Pavis and Aegis, and most annoyingly, every single breaker skill except for Shuriken Breaker on the boss. It is a great chapter for building supports though, but for a map that's strictly support building and nothing else, it only makes sense to leave animations off for this chapter. Before beginning, I'll have Kaze promote. He picks between Swordmaster and Master of Arms. Kaze's goal is to pass down strength to Midori, and the biggest strengths of Swordmaster are not going to do anything for Kaze in the long term. He's never going to get S rank in swords, and he sure as hell doesn't need the extra speed. The only option that makes sense is Master of Arms.
Let's see.
Sakura will also be reclassing. As mentioned before, she's going to become a Beisara. The primary goal for her is to continue being a solid Lancer while finally obtaining access to her magic stat. The skills from Beisara aren't really too big of a concern, since I'm sure it doesn't take a genius to tell which skill I'm going to pass down to her daughter instead.
I'll try my best.
Like I said, the primary goal for this chapter is to continue working on supports. The bulk of these are Silas and Kaze, Silas and Ryoma, Asugi and Sophie, Jacob and Azura, Orochi and Kaden, and for fun, I was working on Takumi and Corrin since they work well together, and they will unlock their A support at the end of this map if I do so. I did bring Mitama, but I don't work on her support with Corrin this map. She's really only here for healing duty on Orochi, who will be sitting on the top choke point of the map for basically the entire duration of this clear. This quite literally can't cause any problems though, because we're about to go into the Paralogue Chain. We're reaching the turning point of the playthrough. After Chapter 20, we unlock the level 3 armory and rod shop, and have access to level 3 meals that cover the whole army, which we got last map. We'll finally be ready to complete the entire rest of the paralogs. Some kids could wait until later, but remember that part of the challenge is that I have to get every single unit from the first and second generation married. We still only have 3 kids, meaning that we still have to obtain Kana, Shigure, Dwyer, Midori, Shiro, Kiragi, Selkie, Hisame, Keldori, and Rajat. All 10 of these units need to spend at least 7 maps working on their S support, and there's only 7 main story missions left that will even count for that. In the interest of building a diverse team rather than just spending the last few maps trying to stress about support points, it's best to grab the rest of the kids now. Especially in Shiro's case, as if I wait even one more chapter to get him, it will actually be impossible to recruit him without getting a unit killed under my restrictions. One nice thing about this map is that not a single enemy here can attack from 2 range. This is a rare instance where I can put Corrin in the center of as many enemies as I want and still safely use the Yato or another sword that can double as opposed to the Kodachi. It's a nice break.
No
The reason why I'm pushing Corrin and Takumi so far forwards is because I'm going to have Takumi grab the chests and items. In this map, the 3 chests contain a Seraph Robe, boots, and a Spy Shuriken. Other droppable items include 2 Master Seals, a Goddess Icon, 5,000 gold, and a Bloom Festal. All of these items will be amazing for me, especially the free Master Seals, because we're running into a money problem. Going forwards, it's going to get harder and harder to make purchases until we obtain Midori, who will be our primary source of gold. We just aren't going to have the funds to be able to buy things like Master Seals or weapons or even tonics for a little bit. So getting a lot of free Master Seals right now is very welcome, as one of the units that I want to have returned to get skills for their kid has not yet promoted. It's also why it's in my best interest to do Midori's Paralogue fairly early into the Paralogue Chain, and by extension, it only makes sense to get her boyfriend first. One thing that may have crossed your mind at some point is that I've been sitting on almost every stat booster so far. I will use them, but who exactly am I saving them for? Directly related to the money problem, I'm saving them for units that are relatively low on one particular stat so I don't have to waste tonics on them. The key one that I'm intending is giving the secret book and one of the goddess icons to Rajat. Rajat is an extremely strong unit. With Sakura as her mother, she has a massive 75% magic growth in Omioji, along with a 60% speed growth. Her problem is that her skill and luck stats are god-awful, and while putting her into Beisara would fix that a little bit, I think it would be much more worthwhile to play into her strengths as a magical one-shotter. Just imagine the possibility she has in dual vantage attack stance. The only issue is to actually get her to hit. The 2 Spirit Dusts in the convoy will likely go to Selkie. With Orochi as her mother, Selkie's magic growth isn't actually that terrible. Orochi's awful speed is slightly made up for by Selkie being already extremely fast. So as long as she gets enough magical support, she can actually do decently well as a strong player phase unit in a magical class. The unfortunate thing is that Selkie's base magic is really bad. In Kitsune, she'll have 10 magic at base, but that gets helped a bit with magic +2 and even-handed, and giving her the spirit dusts and meals will hopefully remove any need for giving her tonics.
Can you do this one?
Be careful.
Something that you've probably noticed by now is that Sophie's inventory is completely empty. That isn't a mistake. While I do want to continue building her support with Asugi, I can continue to keep Sophie at 90 for experience if I never have her do actual combat.
Please.
Believe it or not, Sophie's actually the sole reason as to why I'm doing chapter 20 right now and not waiting until a few more paralogs are completed, as reclassing her into hero will allow her to get the first skill in that class line very quickly. Which brings me to another point.
No hesitation.
It's no surprise by now that Soul Ninja Sophie is happening. For this run, Soul Ninjas are completely suboptimal, and I advise that anyone who wants to do this challenge to not do it. But why? The appeal of a Soul Master Ninja is that they have a very, very low chance of death. In pair up, they obtain a guard gauge after every 2 attacks, as the high speed and low strength of the Master Ninja class allows you to almost always guarantee 2 attacks on an enemy barring crits. If your Master Ninja can take 2 attacks, block the 3rd, you'll be doing 6 attacks against the enemy, and more importantly, that's 6 different times you're able to proc Soul. The more times you proc Soul, the more attacks you can survive. The more attacks you can survive, the more enemies you can kill. The more enemies you can kill, the more trivialized the map becomes. So why is that bad here? Well, the obvious is that we don't get that 3rd attack. With no pair up comes no guard gauge, so you're already setting yourself at a disadvantage by denying yourself that extra chance at proccing Soul. On top of that, you also don't get the offensive and defensive stat bonuses from pair up. This is especially important in the case of defense because Master Ninjas aren't very physically bulky. This means, in reality, you're losing even more chances of survival because those extra stats from pair-ups matter a lot on Soul Master Ninjas. You'll also lose out on a strength pair-up, which could cause you to miss kill thresholds. That inherently doesn't sound so bad, but then you remember that missing a kill in a no pair-up run on enemy phase leaves you vulnerable to dual strikes. Suddenly, everything that a Soul Master Ninja is known for all comes crashing down. In a run where overall survivability is decreased already, that's catastrophic for the relevancy of the build, as its entire point is to take advantage of the survivability that pair-up provides.
I'm coming with you.
This naturally leads to the question of, why the hell am I doing it anyways? It's primarily for the need of less vulneraries and rod uses on Sophie. I'm likely never going to put Sophie in a position where she'll seriously die if she doesn't proc Soul. But there are some maps where it may be beneficial to put Sophie in range of a bunch of enemies at once, and then heal on the next turn for future rounds of combat. This will almost always guarantee that I'll be able to save vulneraries and concoctions for units that aren't going to have the luxury of having neither one of Vantage or a form of self-healing like Renewal, Good Fortune, and Soul. Think Takumi, Silas, Shigure, Asugi, Hinoka, the list goes on.
Be careful.
The technical correct play, if you're curious, is probably for Sophie to go in Bow Knight.
Good luck.
There, she'll get Rally Skill, and she'd be able to serve as the backup unit for Asugi while he does the bulk of the combat. Sophie can even go into Master Ninja herself after that, so she can gain access to unrestricted 1-2 range. There's nothing stopping me from hard pivoting to doing that instead right now. I almost want to, but I'm sure we can all agree that more cutting quotes is way more exciting.
We've got company!
I'm so...
One thing that's going to be exciting is that throughout the duration of the Paralogue Chain and the main story chapters starting from chapter 23 onwards, this challenge is going to get hard. Think back on the maps we've done so far. Chapter 19 really never poses a problem in any playthrough. The Thomas Paralogue looks intimidating, but isn't so bad once you take advantage of the fact that the enemies don't move. Chapters 18 and 17 are also always cakewalks, and Chapter 16 was also not an issue, as long as you count Setsuna blue screening my computer as not an issue. I could go on, but you get the point. The mid-game of Birthright is really easy. The early game is genuinely difficult, but once we got past Chapter 15 and took a detour to do some paralogs, we got way ahead of the level curve, and our unit stats ended up being much higher than the enemies. Paralogs don't quite work the same way. There are a good chunk of easy ones, shoutouts to Isame especially, but there are also a lot of really tough Birthright paralogs that get very pronounced in no para.
can do this.
Chiro's paralogue, like I said earlier, would actually be impossible if I wait much longer to do it. Rajat's infinite reinforcements can become a real problem if you let them get out of hand. Selkie could move too quickly and get herself killed if I can't get to her in time, and Midori's has a lot of strong, over-leveled enemies that you have to deal with. Dealing with a giant clump of enemies that Candace travels with can pose as a serious problem. The late game of Birthright is also home to the infamous difficulty
I'll
spike.
stay with you.
Starting at chapter 23, the enemies will all finally promote. The map gimmicks and layouts also become way harder, which is made even more pronounced with how Birthright's lunatic mode works. The three routes and fates all have different ways of expressing difficulty. The way Conquest does it is it gives most of the enemies really strong skills and it positions them in ways that can be very challenging to work around. The way Revelation does it is that it inflates the hell out of the enemy stats, often causing a lot of your units to struggle to one-round late-game enemies even with proper builds and supports. The way Birthright does it is through enemy density. Birthright has a lot of maps where it non-stop spams enemies at you, evidently by the current map we're playing, which literally has infinite reinforcements. The stats aren't too high, and the skills aren't too hard to deal with for the most part, but there's just a lot of enemies grouped around the same spot, which can get extremely overwhelming for your units. In the late game of Birthright, it becomes easier than ever to suffer from success. Because it's so easy to kill the enemies, it opens up a lot more room for attacks to come your way. As mentioned when talking about Sophie, there's no guard gauge to save my units from that this time. That's when a lot of these builds I've been setting up will really get their chance to shine.
Allow me to join you. I believe in you.
As I've been going on about the future of this playthrough, I've been going around the map activating all the dragon veins to finally stop the reinforcements for good. I'm intentionally keeping some of them open though, particularly the one near Sakura so she can get a decent amount of work on her tome rank done. At this point in the map, I've established a lot of map control and can deal with the enemies very quickly. There's still a few more turns of this though, so to satisfy the curiosity of anyone who may be wondering, what exactly happens if I don't use any of the dragon veins? Like I said earlier, the difficulty of Birthright comes from its enemy density. On the maps with infinite reinforcements, once it gets to later turns, it starts to really ramp up the frequency at which they spawn. On this map, it would actually get to the point where so many enemies are on the screen at once that it would reach the cap for how many units can be on the map at once, which is 50 enemies if you don't know. This actually ends up happening very quickly on this map too. As a test, I played through this map on auto battle to see how fast the Faceless numbers would get to the cap, and it reached 50 Faceless by turn 9.
Show no mercy. Be steadfast.
Be careful.
Please, accept my help. Looks like we have no choice.
I won't let you get hurt.
Stiff upper lip.
I'm finally going to pursue the boss's group. To do that, I'll have Takumi go in range of the boss while holding the brass shuriken, as he isn't affected by the many breaker skills that the boss has. Corrin will back him up, but I actually make a bit of a mistake here by keeping the Noble Yato equipped. If Corrin gets a critical hit here, I'll have to completely restart the map since it would leave 2 enemies alive at the end. We can't have that.
Will you be my squire?
Well, we didn't crit, so I guess it's okay. Sakura kicks off this final turn by killing the 2 nearby enemies, with the help of Azura.
We can do this. Let's try our hardest.
Kaden and Orochi keep doing their thing. Corrin goes ahead and kills the Faceless behind the boss. For the boss kill, there are a few good candidates. Because of the fact that shurikens aren't in any way affected, I can simply use Asugi's dual strike to deal enough damage for the boss kill and feed it to whoever I please, with 100% reliability. Among the units that I have here, the one that makes the most sense is Kaze. In Fates, since growths become fixed after a unit joins your team, I can play ahead to figure out what my unit's stats will be when they end up being at specific levels. With this knowledge, I know that on Kaze's next level up, he will gain 1 point in strength. So this will be his last chance to get that extra bit of strength and pass down to our favorite mermaid.
Remain calm.
See you next time for the start of the Paralogue Chain.